The first American pope didn't grow up in Rome. He grew up in Chicago, on an ordinary street, in an ordinary neighborhood, with no spotlight and no plan for the papacy. Robert Francis Prevost wasn't born into church politics. He wasn't groomed for power. He was just a kid from the Midwest who liked baseball, served at Mass, and asked hard questions about faith. But that same kid would one day walk through the doors of the Sistine Chapel and emerge as Pope Leo XIV. While the world debated whether an American could ever become pope, he quietly crossed continents, serving in the jungles of Peru, navigating church diplomacy in Rome, and building a reputation not just for discipline, but for depth. His story isn't just rare, it's historic, because for the first time ever, the throne of St. Peter is held by a man whose roots are red, white, and blue. When Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost was announced as Pope Leo XIV, the world held its breath, not because of scandal or surprise, but because of symbolism. For the first time in 2,000 years, the leader of the global Catholic Church was American. Not Italian, not Latin, not European, American. Born in Chicago, ordained in the Augustinian order, Prevost's path was anything but conventional. He spent years serving remote villages in Peru, far from Vatican marble and media attention. But it was there, amid poverty and spiritual hunger, that his leadership style emerged. Hands-on, disciplined, deeply pastoral. He returned to the U.S. to teach, then rose rapidly through the church hierarchy. In 2023, he was appointed head of the dicastery for bishops, effectively managing the future leadership of the church. And in 2025, white smoke rose. He didn't just break geographical boundaries, he broke assumptions. This is the story of how Robert Prevost became Pope Leo XIV. Robert Prevost didn't just inherit a title, he inherited a crisis. By the time he became Pope Leo XIV, the Catholic Church was navigating one of the most turbulent eras in modern memory. Global trust in clergy had eroded. Parish attendance in the West was plummeting. Scandals, both covered up and newly revealed, continued to shake the faith of millions. And internally, the church was splitting along ideological fault lines. Some wanted a church that evolved with the world. Others demanded it remain unchanged, a bastion of eternal truth. The center was disappearing. And into that fracture stepped a man from Chicago with no Vatican pedigree, no European lineage, and no expectation of ever becoming pope. His challenge wasn't just theological, it was geopolitical. Would Catholics across Africa, Asia, and Latin America accept an American as the new voice of Peter? Could Rome itself accept a pope who thought in English and prayed in Spanish? Pope Leo XIV would have to unite a church that no longer knew how to agree, not by force, not by popularity, but by presence, precision, and the ability to speak many languages, politically, culturally, and spiritually. Robert Francis Prevost was born in 1955 in Chicago, Illinois, thousands of miles from the Vatican, but just a few blocks from a life of service. Raised in a devout Catholic family, his faith wasn't abstract, it was lived through community, prayer, and the quiet discipline of responsibility. He joined the Augustinian order at a young age, attracted not by prestige, but by the call to serve where few wanted to go. That call took him to Peru. For nearly 2 decades, Prevost worked in the rugged Andes Mountains, ministering to the poor, leading missions, and helping establish theological training in under-resourced regions. It wasn't glamorous, it was gritty. He battled corruption, translated homilies across languages, and walked miles to reach isolated villages. And while Rome debated policy, Prevost lived the frontline reality of Catholic leadership. In 2004, the Vatican noticed. He was appointed Bishop of Chiclayo, then later called back to Rome, where his calm precision earned him influence behind closed doors. In 2023, Pope Francis appointed him prefect of the dicastery for bishops, the department responsible for choosing new bishops across the globe. It was a sign. Prevost was no longer on the sidelines. He was shaping the church's future bishop by bishop. What made him different? Discipline and discretion. He never gave flashy interviews, never sought the spotlight, but insiders say he built a reputation as the silent strategist, respected for his deep knowledge of canon law, his pastoral instinct, and his refusal to play Vatican politics. When Pope Francis stepped down due to health concerns, the conclave was chaotic. Many cardinals were torn between continuity and change. Prevost offered something rare: both. A bridge between Francis' global compassion and Benedict's doctrinal clarity. On the second day of voting, consensus formed. And in an almost poetic twist, the man who never expected the papacy stepped onto the balcony. Not with a grand gesture, but with a single, deliberate word: Leo. By choosing Leo XIV, he tied his future to the strength of history, a name of clarity, of doctrine, of action. But make no mistake, his journey wasn't about ambition, it was about readiness. And in that moment, he was ready. It happened in silence, then erupted in history. On the evening of March 14th, 2025, white smoke curled above the Sistine Chapel. The crowd in St. Peter's Square grew restless. Cameras zoomed in. Then the announcement, Habemus Papam. A name was spoken that the world hadn't heard in over a century: Leo. And then he stepped out. Not in grandeur, not in triumph, but in stillness. Pope Leo XIV stood on the balcony, flanked by cardinals staring into the floodlights and the weight of 2,000 years. The applause started slow, unsure. But then it grew, because they realized this wasn't just a new pope, it was a new page. Behind the scenes, many cardinals said they knew from the moment he entered the conclave. His humility wasn't performative. His decisions in Peru, his leadership in Rome, his silence in politics, it had all added up to something rare: credibility. And when he chose the name Leo, it wasn't to honor tradition, it was to revive it. In that moment, the boy from Chicago became the spiritual anchor for 1.3 billion Catholics. Not with fanfare, but with presence, with purpose, with history behind him and the world ahead. Pope Leo XIV isn't just the first American pope. He's a bridge between continents, ideologies, and generations. His journey from Chicago's parishes to the Vatican's highest office reflects more than ambition. It reflects a church in transition, seeking both roots and renewal. He didn't rise through politics. He rose through presence, through listening, through leading where few would go. And now the world watches not just because he's American, but because he might be the leader the church didn't expect, but desperately needs. Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with the quietest men. What do you think Pope Leo XIV's legacy will be? Will he reshape the church or preserve what's been forgotten? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read everyone. And if you want to keep exploring how leadership shapes faith, check out our next video on the most unexpected decisions made by popes in history. It's a wild ride through power, prophecy, and papal surprises. Make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because in a world changing faster than ever, the stories behind the silence matter more than ever.